Local, national and international news from the heart of Merseyside, backed up by the BBC Worldwide. Linda Mack on Radio Merseyside.
And in a packed programme today, I'm looking for anyone who remembers the Scotland Road Free School in the early 1970s. The school that broke all the rules in a daring experiment in education.
Documentary filmmaker Dick Foster made a film about the school in 1972, and now, 20 years later, he's back in Liverpool and he wants to find out whatever happened to the likely lads and girls of the Free School.
Let's get going, let's get going. Let's get going. Let's get going by teaching and showing for things to be said and done. Words need saying, the plans need laying, but there's so much to be won. Let's get going. Let's get going. And together we may
It was a school with no rules, no uniform and no curriculum. At the Liverpool Free School, children learned what they wanted, when they wanted. Funds were meagre and facilities few. The Free School ran on idealism and commitment, struggling against the odds for just 4 years.
So we have to decide which six we're going to go. And then
It began in the summer of 1971, set up by 2 local teachers who were disillusioned with the state education system, John Ord and Bill Murphy.
for want of a better name, we've got to call the whole thing something, and one or two of us tend to call it a project, but it's not a project in any way at all, really, because there are no leaders, there are no directors, there's no structure, there's nothing, there's just people working together. John Ord, he was a teacher in the same school as me. Madeline Skrider, she came from Durham to work with us. Andrew Churchill, he was doing maths at Sussex and now he runs the office. John Sugden, he was at the Central School of Speech and Drama but decided that the drama was here. Tom Weld, he was at Oxford, then he was a painter, and now he's here.
See you later.
George Shields, well, the things that George does are without end. And of course, the kids.
I rode my bicycle past your window last night. I roller skated to your door at daylight. It almost seems.
In the early 70s, whole streets disappeared in the Scotland Road area as communities were piled up in blocks of flats rising above the rubble of the old back-to-backs. Today, it's the turn of the tower blocks to fall prey to vandalism and dereliction.
I've been looking around a while. You got something for me? Oh, I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand new key.
The new housing springing up in the shadows of the tower blocks gives the appearance of prosperity, but appearances are deceptive. The air is clearer now because the factories have gone, and with them the jobs. The local environment was always important to the Free School. The children's everyday life was seen as the starting point for learning.
709 9333. Ring Linda now.
We did put out an appeal, which we've had some response to already. I'm delighted to say, as usual, you've come up trumps. Amongst those we appealed for was John Ord, who was one of the leading lights. And with a bit of luck, he's on the line now. Good afternoon, John.
Hiya.
Thank you for responding to the call.
It's okay.
You were involved in this original experiment then?
Yeah, I kicked it off, yeah.
Was it an unusual experiment at the time?
Well, it certainly was, yeah. It was, I think, something of a nuclear explosion in educational terms. It really, I think, had a tremendous impact, not just locally, but nationally as well, in terms of the way people thought about education.
I mean, I compare constantly what happened in the Free School with what happened outside it in state schools. And in state schools, there was, I think, a kind of suppression of individuality and effort. You've got 30 kids, a congealed lump of kids there in the classroom. You've got to teach all of them the same thing at the same time. And I think that the Free School gave us a chance to, because we weren't keeping them quiet, as it were, keeping the lid on, people's behaviour or people's thinking. We were in a position to see them as individuals much more, because they were individuals, they were acting as individuals.
The school's principles were based on the work of American philosopher John Dewey and the Brazilian teacher Paulo Freire. Their aim was to create a spirit of freedom and mutual respect between teachers and taught.
So our function is simply to, I suppose, guide them through the kind of process that you go through when you first accept freedom. And it was hard for the teachers too, you know, it was the so-called teachers, it was hard for us too. Because we had leftovers. For example, I was a teacher in the state system for 3 years, and I used to think it right that every kid should work. Because I'd been teaching kids for 3 years, 6 hours a day, assuming they were learning things, you see. Well, I soon got over that, but when I came to the free school, there's still a residue of it left in me, you see. So when you see a kid sitting around talking or just reading, you know, you think, my God, why isn't he doing something? Let's get him down, give him a pen, make him write, make him work. Well, the main problem with freedom is accepting it, because accepting freedom, accepting what it really means, is a frightening thing, you know. I mean, it's like accepting the full message of, say, Christianity. If you really did accept the full message of it, you'd have to change your whole life. And we in this school, 50 of us, and the people who work on this project, have been trying to accept and work out what freedom means. And it's hard, and it's so bloody hard, because the kids, you see, also find it hard to accept freedom and what it really means, because they sometimes confuse it with license. So they think that it means, you know, you can lean out the windows of the train all the time, you know, or you can go up to anybody and ask them to lend you 1 pence or 2 pence. Now, we had some complaints yesterday. And we had an argument on the train on the way back just before I came into Liverpool. And you know what the kids were saying? They were saying, let's have some rules, let's have more discipline, let's have more lessons, let's have more regulations, let's have more set times. And you know what they were doing? They were flying back into the security they felt they had when they were in their own schools, you see. Because we've made rules and we've made rules, and we're going to go on making rules, but we'll go on breaking them. But the important thing is in this school is that the kids are making rules, and they are finding out what freedom means.
Well, I think I would have been an entirely different person if I'd have stayed in a state school, a normal school. It made you think. Also, the way you were treated by the teachers was totally different, because in a normal school you're treated as a pupil, teacher type of relationship, where in the free school it wasn't like that. You were all treated as equal.
It was different, you know, but you got used to it. Yeah. Learning, I say, if you wanted to sit down and do work, you could do it. But if you didn't want to do it, and well, you'd be halfway through and you got fed up, you go on to something else, or, you know, or go and do something completely different. Say, if you were painting and you got fed up, you'd go over and sit down and do some writing.
I'd never been to a farm. I was a city kid, brought up in Scotland Road, and I'd never been to university or on a campus, so, you know, it was interesting to me in that respect, and I learned a lot in that respect, more than I could from a book.
I think it's made me the man that I am today. You know, like, it sort of teaches the whole person, and not just like a small piece, not just like the academics. No, you do mathematics and all that sort of stuff, but it concentrates on the whole person, and that's why they used to take it out to farms and into the woods and things like that, to open your mind up a bit more to life.
Unfamiliar surroundings played a crucial part in widening the children's experiences.
We learn what we want. We learn in the morning, go out in the afternoon. We learn more about the outside world. In the other schools, you're stuck in a class all day. And you never go out. You might just go out to go to the bats or somewhere like that. But you don't go out, you know, to see like the slaughterhouse or the ice ring or places like that. You don't go out and come to Wales. I like the journey mode. Go on. I like the castle. Was it a great tit? Chad, what's that, Tommy? I still had a great tit. A great tit? Shut up!
The free school was an attempt by a number of people to do things with the assumption that anything was possible. And practically the whole of between then and now, particularly the last 12 or 15 years, there's so many different agencies and pressures trying to persuade us of the opposite to that. And I think having had that experience then, the belief that in a sense anything could be possible has stayed with me to some extent. It's taken a battering, but it's still there.
Limekiln Lane is still there too, though few of its old buildings survive. The shop on the corner was once home for some of the free school's teachers and also served as the office.
There are times when I think, you know, God, we must have another office. Just a place where we can go away, do something quickly, like do an hour on the accounts and then it's done for a week, instead of keep thinking, oh, I'll do it and then never doing it, because there are so many people in and out.
What can you do? It's pouring with rain and some of the kids are outside. They're getting soaked and they want somewhere to go and possibly their mother isn't home or something. Do you let them in and forget you're typing and do something later on or what?
Marilyn returned to her native northeast after the free school, and Andy now works in Manchester, but they've kept in touch over the years.
I can remember being worried about paying the heating bill, for instance, and looking in the post every morning for cheques, and I think in those days it was pound notes and £5 notes that people across Britain were sending, and hoping that we get enough in. And then having the argument about whether we paid the heating bill or whether the kids ought to go on a trip to Formby, to the beach or whatever.
Did it make the children more socially aware?
I'm sure it did. They were very aware anyway, because when we went to different parts of the country, they were aware that they were seen as differently, being from Liverpool for a start. We went into some very pleasant rural areas where people took one look at Liverpool kids and were terrified. We went to Worcester on a visit and it was incredible. We saw people battening down the hatches as we came, and we hadn't done anything. I think we just looked so different and the kids looked so different. And we went to Glasgow and the kids made some threatening gestures out of the coach there to some Glasgow kids, and a brick came promptly and hit the coach. And the kids were quiet the rest of that trip.
I mean, we tried to do too many things at once, and people were doing things from cleaning the place to doing the cooking to being with the kids to trying to get some funding. You know, the money just about covered the cost of food and the trips, and very little else.
Come on now, will you get your hands in your pockets? There's plenty there for everyone, and don't say you don't need it. Oh, come on.
Community events like jumble sales and raffles in pubs raised much-needed funds for running the school.
Number 7. Number 7 is the winner. Number 7.
But money was always short. The teachers were unpaid and, living on the dole, they often had to rely on the hospitality of the parents. This dependence on the efforts of local people was a virtue, however, not a shortcoming. The school's motto was always education in the community, by the community. Helpers like George Shields, an unemployed docker, played an important role. In turn, the free school had a decisive effect on George's life. After taking an adult education course, he went on to study at Sunderland Polytechnic for a diploma in community and youth work. Today, George runs a community education centre, offering courses from local history to embroidery.
Some of the young women, you know, I'm talking about 16-year-olds, they have inquired about your class, they were a bit reticent whether you would allow young people to join the class. So, you know...
And would they want to mix in, or would they want
to mix,
yeah.
And I think it's so important that young people mix with old people. I mean, it gives that bit of trust. If you talk to some of your elder women, they don't come out night time because of the fear of getting mugged or broken into. You know, so it's important that people mix.
As though it's sunrise or sunset from a distance. That's lovely.
Would any of this have happened without the free school?
No chance. No chance at all. I was too set in my ways, you know. My life was charted out by me father. You're a ship repairer, you're a casual labourer, you'll never do nothing like that, you know. You're the way parents are like. That was me for the rest of my life. You know, a ship repairer, or now probably on the adult now, you know.
The school's roll grew from 5 to almost 50, but as more and more children came to join the party, the free school was to become a victim of its own ideals.
One ideal was that because it was a free school, that you were free to all kids to come, and that was what happened. And it's hard to go against that ideal because you think, yes, that's right. But it made, I think towards the end, that was one of the things that made it unworkable. More and more different kids were coming, and kids you didn't know, and it was difficult to keep that atmosphere for the kids who'd been there a while and who felt at home and who felt comfortable. And it was difficult for adults to work with new people all the time, and because when people came and they were new and they'd been in state schools and there'd been definite rules and regulations and we didn't have any, they tended to go a bit mad, and you're always contending with that.
Then I think in the end what happened was the Education Committee said that they would partially fund it, but only on the understanding that they would take truants. So then the school got a reputation for all the children being truants.
The likes of the kids we started getting into the school, you couldn't really take them anywhere because they were that disruptive. They caused trouble. They'd be going out stealing things, and you know, they were truants and petty thieves and that kind of thing. But I left after 18 months, and it was beginning to go downhill then.
Well, the last few days were grim because we had no resources. We had a building we couldn't afford to pay for. We had very few people working there at that particular point. We had no money. And so one really felt that the thing was slowly but surely coming to an end. And that was depressing because, and I still feel this now, when we had to close it, let those kids down. And I still feel that now. There's a failure there still which hangs over me. We let those kids down because we had to close the place.
Looking back, is there anything you would have changed?
I don't think we thought deeply enough of how to organise a radical way of learning. I wouldn't have changed anything about the way we did it and what we did. I mean, that happened, and I'm not kind of going to rake over that, you know. I think that's the way it went. But maybe we didn't organise the learning bit of what went on in the school effectively enough.
Support from the Education Authority had always been patchy, and the Catholic Church had opposed the school from the start. Its closure provided the chance to settle old scores.
There were a number of threats made by teachers and head teachers that if kids went to the free school, they'd never be allowed back. And those threats were called in after the school finished.
The other schools wouldn't take us in because we're being the free school. So they set up this school for us to go to and learn. And then the other schools had considered taking us in, do you know.
Why was that?
Because they thought we were stupid. Must thought we were stupid. Or undisciplined, probably. Yeah.
Now Alice has a daughter of her own, Alison.
She's 10. She goes to Our Lady's school. She's getting on fairly good. She's got nothing to complain about. She's a good kid. She's interested in music. She always sings, and she sings in the bath a lot.
Alison, would you like to be solo player now for this one? Can you count me and I'll accompany on the piano, okay?
1, 2, 3, 4.
What does Alice expect of her daughter's education?
Well, I wanted to come out of school and be able to go into a good job or maybe go to college. I think normal schools are more advanced now, you know. Some of the things that Alison's learning now, I learnt in senior school.
So you're going to have a beam down there and a beam down there, aren't you? Now you've got the strong one here, haven't you? You better join that one to that one in the colour, so you're going to have a very, very thick band.
In 20 years, teaching styles have clearly changed, especially in primary schools, but freedom still has its limitations. Head teacher Lorna Furnival.
The children have a certain amount of freedom, but it is structured freedom. There are rules. Children have got to have rules because they like to feel secure. Now, our children, if they feel they've got anything to worry about or they want help, they can just come out to the teacher or the teacher will be there. The teachers don't sit at the desks for long now. I think that is a big change from years ago. If you look in the classroom, the teachers will be walking round. They'll be singing to the pupils all the time during the day, not just sitting at the desk and calling them out one by one. When I came here, the free school was, I think, about to close. I'm not quite sure. But I think some of those ideas have come into the normal teaching of a normal school, that we have got the freedom, but it's not too much freedom. The children know where they're up to. And I think it's good that the children tend to grow up. They become more mature because they can make decisions. Whereas in the old regime, they couldn't make a decision. They were just told and they were shepherded from place to place.
If there was still a free school today, would you send Alison there?
I'd have to go and find out all about the school, you know, and before I'd consider sending her. But I wouldn't, I think no. I think I'd just leave her where she is. She enjoys school, anyway. I'd like her to be a doctor or a nurse, you know. Yeah. But that'd be up to her, wouldn't it? It's entirely up to her. Yeah. I never had. I come out of school without any O-levels or CSEs or anything myself, so never became anything.
Maria went straight to work at Littlewood's Pools after the free school, and later she travelled abroad working as an au pair. Today she runs her own small catering business. Maria has very decided views on the education of her two children, Luke and Charlotte. Both of them enjoy the privileges of a private education. Her sister Diane, who was also a free school pupil, sends her young son Toby to the same school. What made you choose a private school for your own children?
Well, with Luke, it was he was allocated to a large comprehensive school, and the school that I wanted him to go to, which was an all-boys Church of England school, wouldn't accept him because I was a Catholic. So he took a test for the Liverpool College, and passed it, and they got an assisted place there. And then when it was Charlotte's turn to go into the senior school, I decided to send her to a private school as well. I think the education system now is rubbish, to be honest with you. And well, private education is really the only other alternative.
Makes oxygen, pure oxygen, and came up through the delivery tube and into the beehive shaft, which then made the oxygen in the gas jar. We used the oxygen and it just burns all these chemicals reacted.
I think to start with, you're getting a choice. You're not just being herded along and said, right, you will go to this school or you will go to whatever school. It's your own choice. I think that was what appealed to me about the free school as well.
Oh, I think you have to...
Okay.
Hang on.
So it's for yesterday?
Well, yeah, it's for the whole week, really.
You either opt out and go for private education or you don't send them to school at all. And maybe if myself or Diane, if I was at that level where I could educate my own children, I'm probably up for that.
I've always thought that before I had a child. And right when I had him, I thought, well, he'll go to a private school. I'm not snob or anything like that, I'm not.
I think in life, it depends what your standards are, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you know, what you want for your children. And we both think that one of the most important things you can give them is a decent education. Especially coming from a working class area.
Yeah.
Because hopefully, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with the working class people or working class areas. And I would never like my kids to sort of lose the roots type of thing.
No.
But for them to be educated, and if they wanted to, they so choose, you know, to get a good job, go on to university. Which we never had them opportunities.
That's it.
A third of the children we contacted are now unemployed, but almost as many work as managers or run their own businesses. The rest are manual workers, and tragically, 3 have died. After the free school, Tony's first job in an engineering factory came to an abrupt end when the business went bankrupt. Following a spell in voluntary community work, he took an apprenticeship in hairdressing, and using his new skill, he travelled around England and overseas. 5 years ago, he spent a year in the Falklands, making enough money to set up his own barber shop. Tony has 3 children, and although he's now separated, he takes a keen interest in their education. I wondered if he would have sent them to the free school.
I think when you get to a certain age at school, you've got to want to learn. You've got to want to be educated and make something of yourself. But for other kids, it was a way of opting out. It was, you know, you could go and do nothing, literally. You could just go and go missing. If there was one going now, I don't know. As I say, I'd let them choose themselves.
Not all of the children managed to stay on the right side of the law.
I tried to get into a few other schools and they wouldn't accept me because I'd been to this school. From then on I was just in trouble all the time and I ended up in Borstal. Well, after I got out of Borstal, it was just the same again, couldn't get any jobs anywhere. You know, I just give up looking for work at that time, like, it's a bad period. It's just back to crime again, you know, like, same again, burglaries and all that, stealing from warehouses, stealing cars, joyriding and that. You know, the crime seems to be getting more serious as the weeks were going by. You know, and then I think when it started getting up to 18, 19 years of age, it was robberies, all that sort of stuff. And got caught for a serious crime and got bail and then jumped bail. And then about 2 years later I got caught for an armed robbery. And I escaped about a week later. I think sometime shortly after that I ended up in Australia. And I just settled down in Australia for a while.
Do you think education could have changed the course your life's taken?
I wouldn't say no, not in the short period that I was at the school. But I do feel that they planted a small seed in me, even though it was in bad soil to begin with. It took root and it's sort of helped me later on in life. I think as a better person. I know I'm in jail but you sort of reflect on things that's happened, and you realise all the mistakes that you've made and that. And you sort of you seem more disciplined in yourself.
After the free school, life was uncertain for its founding teachers too. Community action brought Bill Murphy into ever greater confrontations with the establishment. Demoralised and fearful for the future, he left Liverpool behind and headed for New Zealand, determined to forget community work and build a new life for his family. And John Ord found there was no easy way back into mainstream education.
Well, after the free school, I wasn't allowed to teach in ordinary schools. I was told that I wouldn't be welcome, my presence wouldn't be welcome. So I did all sorts of things, from working in a cleaning firm, working on the shop floor in a car factory, working on the buses. Did that for a couple of years. And eventually they let me back into teaching, so I did a bit of teaching. But the free school left me with a kind of impulse to change things, and that's never left me. And so I ended up in politics, and in the late 70s up to mid-80s, up to 1987, in fact, I was a councillor.
John became a Liverpool councillor during the most turbulent period of the city's political history.
Chaos to come in Liverpool, a cabinet minister's warning over an illegal budget. One of Britain's biggest cities is facing an economic and political crisis. Liverpool City Council seems certain to pass an illegal budget when they meet in less than 2 weeks from now. Left-wingers on the council are now firmly in control, and they intend to spend more than the city takes in from the rates, rents and the government.
We're in a position now where the phony war is over. We're in now the real battle with this Tory government. And certainly we're confident that we get in that battle, we'll get the backing of the people and we'll win.
The battle was lost and John was among the councillors disqualified. The political stigma left him even less acceptable to the establishment, and now he's unemployed again. John's own children have done well in state schools. Joanne has grade A GCSEs and his sons are at university. With time on his hands now, John's thoughts are turning back to the free school and the possibility of trying once again to realise the theories of alternative education. In tight-knit communities like Liverpool's, life has a habit of changing, but staying the same. Banjo player John Cordwell still strums his banjo, but now it's in the pub he manages with his wife. Tonight, though, it's not the band that's brought together the free school teachers and children after so many years. They're here for news of Bill Murphy, the school's other founder who emigrated more than a decade ago and who no one has seen since.
From Maggie Thatcher's Liverpool, Bill and Marie Murphy and their family came here, Auckland in New Zealand.
We'd always wanted to take part in a great adventure, which emigrating is. It's a beautiful thing to do, to leave one place and go and make a completely new life in another place. So we saw it as an adventure.
The adventure brought Bill back into social action, eventually leading to a community housing project based on his own self-built designs.
A prerequisite of a community housing sector or a community housing construction sector was in fact an enabling technology.
We had 3 daughters and they've all got 2 or 3 children.
Had nothing to do
with about 8 grandchildren. We usually write to them at Christmas.
Following that initial success, Bill and his colleagues have refined their method. They have new designs suitable for virtually any location, and they run regular accelerated learning programs for those seeking skills, enabling them to build their own home for 1/3 of the normal cost.
Forget about all the other stuff. The most important thing of all that's happened to us since we've come to New Zealand are our grandchildren. And I think a lot about the free school, and in particular I wonder what happened to what sort of a life all the kids had, and whether going to the free school, whether it helped them or whether it hindered them. So all I can say now is we think a lot about you. Goodbye. And I hope to come and see all of you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.
The influence of the free school on those involved in the project is undeniable. For many, it set the course of their lives. But did the school have any wider impact on the world of education? Greg Query has been involved in the education of young people for nearly 20 years.
Undoubtedly there has been a broader impact, not just of the free school movement. The free school movement was part of a general call for reform and change education. There were many different parts of that, and many different people made a contribution towards it, of which the free school was right at the cutting edge. They were trying to put these new ideas into practice. And when you look at the education system today, you can see that many of those ideas, for whatever reason or from whichever direction, have now been brought into and are an accepted part of good education practice. The whole question of child-centred education is one of them, and in particular where the free schools are concerned, the question of using pupils' experience and starting from pupils' everyday experience. You can see that in English teaching, in language teaching, in all sorts of areas of the curriculum. Also the question of a democratic education, that pupils should be involved in what they're doing, and that local communities should be involved. Today, again, it's taken as good practice that local communities should take control through the governors, and that the local community should be more involved in their school. Another thing to bear in mind is that the education system today is much more closely controlled in terms of what goes on in the classroom, so there's less room for people to experiment and to bring about change. At the time of the free school, inspectors would come along and ask what the educational objectives were, and if they accepted those, they would then say, let's see if the school is delivering those. Today they would come along and say, are you delivering the national curriculum? And if you're not, that's it. So there's much less room for those sorts of experiments today.
At the other end of the country, politically as well as geographically, Tom Weld is trying to expand the confines of the national curriculum. He lives on the Dorset Downs with his partner Judith and their 2 children.
So I make a green for you, Mama.
Working with local schools, Tom is developing projects exploring radical ideas, but within the framework of the state system.
The project, based on one of these topics, kind of dropped as if from a hat into the national curriculum, namely the ancient Greeks, came about because I wanted to offer to schools around here the possibility of going in and running a programme of classes based on any topic of their choice that they've had some difficulty with. Their remit was simply to look at the ancient Greeks, and that led to looking at democracy. I mean, this great word that we fought for, and the Western countries of Europe have fought for and done all sorts of things in its name, and pointing out that this word that comes from Greek, of course, included slavery, and looking at what does that word mean in their lives now, and looking at what kind of ways there are of groups of people making choices in their own lives and their families, and they enacted lots of different scenarios around that theme, and at the same time in the school as well.
Nervous about its image, the school was unwilling to be filmed. So does experience lead Tom to believe it's possible to introduce radical ideas into mainstream education today?
I have grave doubts about that. I think there are, of course, within the state system, pockets where people are managing to do things which honour children's individuality and potential, and give full expression to children's creativity. I think they're very few and far between. And, I mean, reading the hard-hitting, arrogant stuff that I wrote about the school in that pamphlet at the time, there are a lot of things that I wouldn't change. I might change the language slightly, because I know a lot of state school teachers and they're friends of mine, and I wouldn't be that dismissive. I wouldn't dream of it. But, I mean, as far as the ideas are concerned, I still think it's crazy to try and work with 35 or 40 or even 30 children to do a lot of things. I still think it's an accident of the way that education's set up.
The education system, because it's about young people, will always be, first of all, a matter of political debate. But there will always be calls for reform and change inside it, because society doesn't stand still, and certainly young people don't stand still. So you will always have that pressure for reform and change inside it.
When the free school finally closed, you said that although it was a very sad day, the school had proved its point. What was that point?
Well, the point that things can be done differently in education, that community matters, that solidarity matters, that a radical education is possible. You can do it. You don't have to sit in a chair and write about it. You can get out there and work with people in working class areas and inner cities, and you can achieve things. And for 3 or 4 years, we achieved a lot. But we ran out of money, we ran out of resources, and in the end, couldn't sustain the effort. But it's possible, and that was the point that I was making at that time, that a radical approach is possible. It's also necessary. If you look at what's happened to education since, I think the point is proved. We still need to take a radical approach, and we can still do it.
I roll my back, I roller skate, don't try no pull. Don't go too fast, but I go pretty far. Somebody who don't try, I've been all around the world. Some people say I've done alright for a girl. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.